Hey there, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Email Never Sleeps. Today's topic is actually a really interesting one. We're calling it Navigating Global CRM, the Engagement Strategies for Success. And I'm really excited to introduce my guest today, Eliza Lee. Eliza, give us a little bit about your background. Welcome to Email Never Sleeps. Tell us a little bit about yourself before we jump into the topic.
Hi, thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to speak with you today. So my name is Eliza. I am currently managing CRM at a beverage e-commerce company
Uh-huh.
based in Vienna, Austria. And lots of the stuff around CRM that I've been doing recently relate to a lot of your, typical e-commerce automations, your cart abandons, your customer delight flows, as well
Mhm.
as product launches, looking into customer and purchase behavior to come up with basically different content and offers for our marketing subscribers.
Awesome. And so for the audience, believe it or not, whether you are US based or outside that of the US, there's no doubt in my mind you have people that are an international audience. And I've got some experience in dealing in international audiences, and it's not uniquely, distinctly like cut and dry different, but there is some nuances to
Mhm,
how CRM works internationally.
mhm,
And I'm curious, Eliza, when we start thinking about CRM from an international perspective, I'd love
mhm.
for you to just sort of give your thoughts, right, on international and differences, maybe differences, because I think you've got both North America based, Europe based, Asia based sort of experience, and I'm just curious, what are some of the unique differences in CRM, if you know them?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so as you mentioned, I have dabbled a bit in CRM in both Asia, Southeast Asia to be specific, Australia, New Zealand, Europe, as well as North America. I'm a little bit like wary to, group people into
Yeah.
certain clusters, but for sure, just based on observation and experience, I think it really depends on your product and your industry. And for sure, you
Hmm.
do observe certain similarities in how customers behave.
Hmm.
So, for example, when it comes to just if you take a look at email, for example, what
Hmm.
is send time? I think this myth of optimal send time
Yeah.
for customers, it's always there. For example, with different markets, you have different time concepts. For example,
Hmm. Hmm.
people do different things at different times of day. For example, in the Middle East. They have weekends on different days than the Western world, for example. So these
Hmm.
are certain things to take into consideration on when you target your audience.
Hmm.
But of course, it also depends on what you as a brand or product are trying to market, as
Right.
well as, lots of tools these days also have smart targeting so that they
Mhm.
automatically already send your communications based on the best time that they observe the customer clicks or purchases.
It's a good point, right? We have to take into consideration that there's cultural differences, that there's
Mhm,
obviously time zone. Take that out for a second, but the way that people ingest content at a different times and at different things. And if you're a
mhm,
US based marketer, especially if you've got a large market outside that of the US, you really have to do sort of your research, right?
mhm,
Around how people react, how people
mhm,
engage, and then sort of try to what I would say segment your list from an international perspective to make sure that you can optimize it, because it's not a one size sort of fits all. Whether you want to
exactly.
say it, whatever product you're trying to sell, it doesn't matter, right? And that
Mhm,
I think is important. When we as strategists, right, and I consider you to be a strategist because you've been in this business for quite some time. We start talking about building customer journeys and building
mhm,
email automations. And, I've recommended many different flows throughout my career. Some of them are similar, some of them are different. is there any something that you have found in your career, whether it's a customer journey that has really resonated no matter where, or at least in certain parts
Mhm,
of the world? I'm just
mhm,
curious because I know what I recommend, but you've been doing this internationally a lot longer than I.
mhm. Yeah. So I can think of two things. Firstly, I think always being respectful of customer consent,
Hmm.
regardless of where you go. Like, sure, you have CCPA in California, you have GDPR in Europe.
Yeah.
In Asia, it might be a bit more lax, especially
Mhm.
from where I come from. But at the end of the day, respecting marketing consent is super important.
Mhm.
Only send your customers if they have actually consented to hearing from
Right.
your brand, for example.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then you can always engage them on a deeper basis because these are people who are actually interested.
Hmm.
And then the second thing I think is rewarding your customers. So, regardless of where you are, you're always going to have loyal fans, you're going to have detractors, you're going to have just,
Hmm.
your typical everyday customers. But I think,
Hmm.
especially for your loyal customers, it always helps, or it's always rewarding to show them you appreciate them and basically offer them content or products or offers that are valuable to them and can help them in their daily lives.
Speaking of loyalty, as an
Hmm.
American, right, I am loyal to probably about three or four brands. And one of
Hmm.
the things that I try to do is get involved in their loyalty program, right? Whether
Yeah.
it's points based or whatever based, so I can reach higher tiers, get better rewards,
Hmm.
or perks, so to speak. When you start thinking about building these journeys and
Hmm.
getting people to engage, how important, not just treating your loyal customers differently, how important is a loyalty program internationally in any
Hmm.
country you've ever worked with them wanting to take advantage of points? And do you separate those loyalty customers and
Hmm.
have different messaging? So it's a wide open question around loyalty, international loyalty.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, so I think because the essence of loyalty programs is to reward your loyal customers. So I think
Yeah.
it, in general, it is appreciated. That said, there are some differences. For example, I think maybe, in Asia, you have more of these super apps where you have all the different services in one. So people
Hmm.
are really used into loyalty programs that not only reward for purchasing with your brand, but also with collaborations and partnerships.
Hmm.
Whereas, for example, there are brands that do have loyalty programs that are only for their brand itself. So
Right.
it's really depending on, firstly, the market, and secondly, what you have to offer in your program itself, because,
Mhm.
after a while, customers tend to get bored of the same types of offers in there as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
Um, in our call before this, and we chatted a
Hmm.
little bit about a welcome experience.
Hmm.
And I'm curious, without naming names or companies or anything, what
Hmm.
would you think is the most ideal welcome experience or the most successful welcome experience you've ever
Hmm.
created?
Hmm.
And I'm just curious how that kind of came about. So I'd love your thoughts on that.
Hmm. Yeah, so I can maybe speak from an e-commerce perspective.
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very prevalent these days to always have some kind of hook or a welcome offer for e-commerce brands.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you like it or not, I think lots of subscribers these days, the main thing they want to subscribe for is for the welcome discount. So I
Mm-hmm.
think it's really for brands to decide, okay, is that something you want to offer? And then how can you change the narrative once you get the subscribers to subscribe to your content after? So basically, the first thing, offering them something of value so that it also lowers the barrier to purchase with your brand.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, building on this welcome experience is showing customers and reassuring them why they should purchase with your brand.
Mm-hmm.
So you using, for example, customer reviews, PR articles,
Mhm.
magazines, awards. So all these are also really helpful to include in your content.
Right.
And also, I think as part of the first purchase, which is really big for e-commerce, your first purchase is what makes or breaks it.
Mm-hmm.
There's also other things to consider, like your delivery experience,
Mm.
the unboxing experience when the person opens the product. Does it wow them? What else do they see in the box? How
Mm.
you can push them further to, for example, join your loyalty program,
Mm-hmm.
look at your social media, for example. So I think these
Yeah.
are the core facets.
One of the things that I think that I've learned over the last probably 5 or 6 years is, this global pandemic that happened, people want to feel a little bit more connected to brands,
Mhm,
regardless of the demographic, regardless of the age of the people that you're dealing with, especially e-commerce. They don't always just want to be pushed into buy more, or here's a discount,
mhm.
and here's a discount. They want
Yeah.
to understand your brand and what do you do. And I
Mhm,
always sort of use the example of Patagonia, right? I'm not
mhm,
your typical demographic for Patagonia, but I appreciate their email program. They use real
mhm,
models. They give back to the environment. It's something that I'm passionate about. And I think every brand out there, e-commerce or not, whether you sell socks or washing machines or water bottles, you have to be able to say what differentiates yourself in that
exactly.
storyline. And
Yeah.
people need to feel that connectiveness, right? And so you can
Mhm,
use email to drive, whether it's in a welcome series or whether it's inside your promotional emails, to
mhm,
drive them to sort of, like you said, to the other channels, right? Making sure
mhm,
it's an omni-channel experience. And where I
mhm,
think sometimes brands, whether be it North American based or international based or whatever
mhm,
their audience, don't really do a great enough job because they want to get to that next step. They want
mhm,
people to purchase or
mhm.
give revenue without thinking of the long-term implications. So you make
Exactly.
a really good point, right? Is, we need to take a step back and slow down a little bit. And I think that's
Mhm,
really important for any e-commerce, email marketing, CRM individual listening to
mhm,
this. Is it's okay to slow down because you're in
mhm.
this for the long term, the long haul, as opposed to just short term. You
Exactly.
mentioned something about cross-channel engagement, and
Mhm,
every email conference I go to, every white paper I read, every blog post, we start talking about cross-channel or omni-channel or whatever the flavor of the month is with
mhm,
that title. Um, how do you, or how have you in the past created cross-channel engagement in email? And I'm going to caution you. I had a podcast earlier, and I might be dating myself, but we started talking about
mhm,
when is it appropriate to use social icons in an email, and when it's.
mhm.
So I'm curious your cross-channel engagement advice
Yeah.
for folks.
Yeah. So I guess, in CRM, I guess email is one of the largest channels. Almost any consumer-facing brand or even B2B has email, mainly
Mhm.
because of the advantage it offers. You present a lot of information to the customer, and it's always there in the inbox.
Mhm.
But of course, with different markets or with changing times, different kinds of channels pop up. For example, WhatsApp, or like in
Mm.
China, you have WeChat, you have Line, you also have like iMessage, for example.
Yeah.
So I think it really depends on your customer base. So it's really about being where they are, and also, of
Mhm.
course, as a business, looking at the costs for you to communicate through these channels.
Yeah.
The good thing is, I guess, a lot of providers or tools right now always integrate with all these different tools so that it's
Mhm.
easy for you to kind of connect to these various sources. And then from there, it's really about tailoring your content to these channels,
Mhm.
and then looking at which one your customer prefers to be contacted on.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Um, I've had a smartphone for
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning of time. I actually had
Mm-hmm.
one of the original Blackberries. And call me old
Perfect.
fashioned, call me old. I do not order,
Mm-hmm.
I do not purchase anything from my
Yeah.
phone. I don't know why.
Yeah.
I might do it from my tablet on my Amazon app,
Mm-hmm.
but I don't get an email and click on it and go to Safari or whatever my browser of choice is on my phone
Mhm.
scrolling, create an account, purchase something. It's just, I'm old fashioned. I like to go to the good old desktop, right?
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about the mobile, not just mobile engagement, but mobile
Mhm.
purchase. Because my theory is, and I don't have any data to back this up, so everyone just don't put hateful comments in here. I don't have any data to back
Yeah.
this up, but I don't really think Americans love to purchase things on their phone unless it's through an app. I
Mhm.
think it's a little bit of a tedious thing. Tell me about your
Mhm.
experience about e-commerce and purchasing on.
Yeah. Funny that you say that because recently I saw this meme where
Yeah.
it went like, yeah, no matter what you say, big purchases, like for millennials, for example, need to be made on a big screen. That's the
Mm,
unspoken rule.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I also relate to that. I think it's also a lot about this comfort. For example, maybe the generation right now grew up with mobile phones at their hand.
Hmm.
I think it also depends, for example, if you have like if you're a marketplace app where all your information is stored in there and it's really easy to browse and make a quick
Hmm.
purchase, then I think for sure the barrier to purchase in mobile is way lower.
Hmm.
But in a lot of cases, it's mainly okay, communication. People open it on mobile, maybe they save it in their mind, and then later they go to the desktop to make a purchase. So I think that for sure is still definitely a predominant behavior, I would say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And I remember being in Australia many years ago in New Zealand, and I
Mm-hmm.
asked the same question to people,
Mm-hmm.
and they were teetering on we spend a lot of time on our phones, but we
Mm-hmm.
don't feel comfortable, or the
Mm-hmm.
experience wasn't what we thought it would be. So I'd rather just, like you said, make the mental note and then go
Mm-hmm.
back to it and say, hey, I'm interested in purchasing it from X or from Y, um,
Mm-hmm.
type of stuff. So one final topic before we sort of wrap it up.
Mm-hmm.
You had mentioned talking about net promoter score.
Mm-hmm.
And it's used to various degrees here, at least in
Mm-hmm.
the States. I've had experience with using net promoter score in an organization. Is that something that you as a CRM strategist, as somebody that
Mm-hmm.
you really rely on, is NPS?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for sure, I think over time I've really come to love NPS because it's really how you use it.
Mm-hmm.
So for example, what I can recommend is to have an NPS going out to your customers
Okay.
and also then having this feedback loop back to the team somehow. So for example, if you use Slack, you can easily connect these surveys.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if you want to funnel your detractor comments back and then you involve people from various departments of your company in these comments, I think it's really helpful because you can group them into various topics. For example, how you can improve your product,
Yeah.
which specific SKUs people really love or dislike, how their experience went. So I think although it is a sample of your customers, it's still a really good gauge to see
Mm-hmm.
how your brand is doing, on
Mm-hmm.
a week-to-week basis. You can get notified of issues just like that because you see active customer feedback. And I think it's a really good way to improve yourself as a brand as well, just by listening to your customers.
You're talking about an NPS survey. Is that you
Mm-hmm.
usually post purchase, post number of purchases, things of that
Mm-hmm.
nature, right? So you're asking for customer feedback. And it's funny,
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten 3 NPS surveys over the last 3 days on some brands that I have engaged with locally here in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very interesting. But I'm also getting now a lot of companies sending me SMS messages to say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, I hope you had a good experience at X, would you review us?
Mm-hmm.
And that's becoming more and more prominent here, at least again, when I give my phone number out or when I give my email out, right? They're asking me to go and review my experience
Mm-hmm.
literally almost probably within an hour or instantaneously after I've
Yeah.
engaged with them. So that's a sort of a good way to sort of engage. And that's across channel, right? So
Yeah.
that's obviously I get an email and then I'll get an SMS
Mm-hmm.
and stuff. So interesting. All right. So Eliza, we've reached time, believe it or not. I would love for you, you know, to just sort of give us some tips, one or two
Mm-hmm.
or three, or what you feel the key takeaways are from your
Mhm.
perspective. I'll then give my key takeaways and then we'll wrap it up. So the
Mhm.
floor is yours. What would you want people to know?
Yeah. Um, I guess perhaps two things I'm always thinking about as CRM marketer. Firstly, respecting the customer consent.
Mhm.
That's really important, especially when more and more people get bombarded with lots of advertising and messages. So
Right.
that's the most important thing. And I think the second thing is to really, I guess, as cliche as it sounds, put yourself in your customer's shoes.
Mhm.
Think of, okay, which part of the journey they're at, where did they hear about your brand from,
Yeah.
and then how do they interact with your product to really come up with different offers or content that are valuable for them.
hmm I'm going to add on to your points. I
Mm-hmm.
think consent is very important, but I
Mm-hmm.
also think in understanding the cultural consent of things, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Germany, it's much different from a privacy perspective than it
Mm-hmm.
is in the States or in the
Mm-hmm.
UK.
Yeah,
People are vigilant. And I use the word vigilant loosely because
exactly.
it's true.
Yeah.
Vigilant about their privacy, and you
Mm-hmm.
have to respect their privacy. And just because you may
Mm-hmm.
get somebody that's interested in a different country doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean that they have the same views. And I've read a lot of customer feedback from people
Mm-hmm.
around the world about privacy and consent and really what you should be honoring. And
Mm-hmm.
oftentimes that's overlooked. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
really sort of important. I think the second key takeaway is looking at your subscriber base. And a lot of brands today love to use, I'll use the word euphemisms or humor
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
ways that they say things that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't resonate throughout the world.
Yeah.
And whether you're dealing with somebody in Brazil or somebody in Poland or
Mm-hmm.
Sweden, that there's this thing that
Mm-hmm.
you can't say the same thing
Exactly.
for somebody in Brazil as you would as somebody in
Yeah.
Norway, right? It
The
won't go
tone of
over very
voice really matters. Yeah.
well.
And the
And
context.
and so before you start sending it out and you're noticing
Mm-hmm.
that your audience is big in certain parts of the world, you have to make sure that what you're saying is going to resonate in context,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, in tone.
Exactly.
Because what's funny to you may not be funny at all to
Yeah.
somebody else. What's
Yeah.
what you believe is um, a slam dunk or like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, they should
Witty.
know this, right?
Yeah.
Really isn't, right? And
Yeah.
I think that's important. But ultimately, CRM around the world is all about engaging our customers,
Mm-hmm.
understanding our customers, them understanding us, and
Mm-hmm.
us the ability to deliver on the quality, on the product, and in their experience, whether it's just in one channel in email or across channels in email. So wow. Look, we're over time, but it was great. Eliza, thank you so much for spending some time with me. I
Thank
really
you for having
appreciate
me.
honored to have had you on.
Mm-hmm.
And we'll give Liza's details, where to reach out to her on LinkedIn. Um, Reach out to her, ask a question. She's been wonderful throughout this process. And I wanted to thank you again today. And everybody, thank you for continuing to support Email Never Sleeps. Keep doing what you're doing in email, but hopefully you'll try something different in the coming weeks. And hopefully we've been able to inspire you to do so. Eliza, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Andrew.